Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'm Emma Tillaro. I'm the Associate Director of the Association of English Language Publishers of Quebec. It's great to see you all gathered here, and hello to everyone online. And thanks to the Atwater Library team for hosting us this evening. We're really happy to be here in person. I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered in a place known as Jojage in the Kanien'kehá:ka language and Munuyang in the language of the Anishinaabe. Our association represents a diverse community who live and work on the territories of many Indigenous peoples, including the Kanien'kehá:ka, Abenaki, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat. As a publication celebrating local books, we acknowledge the first storytellers of these lands. I'd like to thank Elise Moser, and who's sitting right there, and Rebecca West, who's tuning in online, for all their work in putting together such an incredible lineup for our holiday book fair. And of course, our APP curator, Faith Paré, who's sitting right there, who suggested this collaboration and organized such a wonderful reading. I would also like to express gratitude to our funders, the Government of Canada's Canada Book Fund, the Canada Council for the Arts, and SODEC. This event is part of our holiday book fair, with the book fair itself beginning tomorrow at Concordia University. The fair will be open Friday and Saturday, 11 to 5 p.m., so please come and see us. We'll have books from 19 local publishers with 90 authors in attendance and events happening in the fourth space. All the details can be found on readquebec.ca. We have a fantastic event lined up for you this evening with readings by Trynne Delaney, Halen, and Prathna Lor. We also have our friend Andreas from Paragraph Bookstore sitting at the back, so if you want to get copies of their books, please do so. They'll happily sign them for you after the event. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming my lovely colleague and APP curator, Faith Paré.
Thank you, Emma. Bear with me, folks. I am fighting off a sinus infection, which I know is not very fashionable to say, but I came prepared. I had my ibuprofen and pseudoephedrine popped, and I put my N95 on, and I said, I'm coming for the poetry. So I'm very happy to be here. And Emma is my very lovely colleague from the Spoken Web Network. And it's been great working with her over the past few years and also on this event. She is very much a rising star, I think, in literary organizing, and I'm very grateful to her. So thank you for introducing me. My name is Faith Paré. Welcome, everyone. I've been the curator of the APP since December 2021. So I have the immense privilege of getting to speak to poets on a regular basis about their work and collaborate with local organizations like ALAC to manifest these kinds of readings. And I appreciate, Emma, that you led with the land acknowledgement and putting forward first and foremost our fundamental thank you to the Kanien'kehá:ka people as the original custodians of this land since time immemorial. And one of the aims, at least for my curatorship of the APP, is to really think critically about how we materially support the Indigenous artists, elders, knowledge keepers, organizers, and nations who gather and grow here in Jojage. And how do I, with the resources that I have as a Black curator, as someone with institutional privilege, give the kind of resources I have towards supporting that work that is already happening? So I'm really looking forward to some works in progress at the moment with Indigenous curators in the coming year, but also for non-Indigenous audience members, today I invite you to seriously consider your status, your ongoing obligations and relations to the peoples whose lands you're situated on or that you may call home. And a valuable resource we've been sharing regularly at the APP is native-land.ca, where you can begin to learn a bit more of the poetry, for example, of original place names. As well, all of us can benefit from reflecting on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action to better understand how requests made by Indigenous communities can also, how we can fill in our role of solidarity in supporting Indigenous self-sovereignty. So looking forward to those conversations and those collaborations with you. Thanks. And if this is your first time, I appreciate you being here. So the Atwater Poetry Project was founded by poet and translator Wana Avasili-Koye in 2004. And the purpose was to highlight vibrant English language writing in Montreal and in Quebec. We're still dedicated to linking that work that's flourishing here into conversation with writing across Canada. And last week we were super lucky to host, with Elise as well, who I'll be thanking in a minute. We were really lucky to host a unique tour with 3 winners of the PEN Canada New Voices Award. And they were all from Southern Ontario, and they were alongside Isabella Wang, who's a fabulous poet and essayist based in British Columbia. So it's really cool that we were able to have so many folks from out of town come here and be able to dip their toes into the writing scene. And now we get to celebrate the holiday book fair and really think critically and savor local writing that's kind of enlivening our city and our province. The APP has hosted nearly 300 readings across 7 curators, and all of them are engaged actively in Montreal's writing community. And then we've mostly been operating online since April 2020. So this is our 2nd event back in the Adair Auditorium, and we are absolutely thrilled. It's gorgeously renovated. It feels very nice to hear my voice echoing in a room and not just look at my computer. So I want to thank past curators, past and present APP poets, and fellow event organizers, and to all of you who've come out today to be generous with your taste, with your time, with your cash, buy some books, please, perhaps, and to make this series, you help make this series old and wise. I'm very grateful for that, so thank you. I also have to thank the Canada Council for the Arts. Their support makes these readings possible. To Lynn Verge, who's just stepped out of the building, but she's the fabulous executive director of the Atwater Library. She and the staff at the library have extended their really far-reaching support for the last almost 20 years, so thank you very much. Huge shout-outs particularly go to Patrick Pinn. He is the IT manager and tech whiz here. He helps us get things streaming like right now, and so hello to folks at home. And he's been excellent in helping us out getting used to the space. As well, I have to thank Andy Katz, who offers security for the library after hours. If you see Andy downstairs, give him a wave. He's a very nice guy. So thank you to him. And I have to thank Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca, and Emma Alak for jumping on board with this collaboration, making the entire book fair cohere. I'll talk to you a little bit more about the book fair if you are still learning about it and you want to jump in this weekend. Thank you to Elise Moser, book fair coordinator, and she's been so excellent with her clear-eyed organization towards this event, to so many literary initiatives in the city. I really appreciate your support here and moving forward. Thank you. And thank you to Andreas and the team at Paragraph for serving as the Holiday Book Fair's longtime partner. Thank you so much for being so organized, getting the books here tonight, and offering them for curious audience members. So I encourage you folks to, take browse, chat with the poets, get an autograph or two. You might be able to put it on eBay one day when one of them wins a Nobel, or you can just keep it in your collection. It's up to you. So without further ado, we're about to get started. I think just a few housekeeping rules. So it's a sincere pleasure to be back here. It's also a privilege, I think, for the series to be allotted this space. And it means that we're constantly trying to cultivate respect and safety amongst ourselves and other people in the space. So firstly, it's no longer required by the provincial government to wear a mask, but of course we do have masks at the back. If you'd like to don one while you're sitting or while you're interacting with folks, be very appreciated for those who want to come to these events but may not feel as safe because they're immunocompromised, etc. So I appreciate us all working together to do our part. If at any moment during the night you don't feel great, you don't feel safe, you can find me or one of the great staff members at the back, and we can certainly give you a hand, and Andy's available downstairs for assistance if needed. In terms of directions, washrooms, because I always forget to do this. I always forget. People need to pee at these things. That you can find them. There is a gendered washroom down here, a women's washroom. I believe there's a men's washroom on this side down the hall. Elise may be able to correct me on that. Elise cannot correct me on that. So I will help you find one if... Oh, yes, okay, thank you. Thank you, Elise. I always forget. Yes, that is non-gendered, and it's wheelchair accessible as well if you need some extra space. So no need to go downstairs if you don't want to. And finally, the Atwater Library is a heritage building. It's awesome. We're seeing this gorgeous auditorium for public use. And please be gentle and mindful with the architecture and furniture if you can. There's been a big renovation recently, so everyone's just getting used to it and being careful with and mindful with what's here. And if you anticipate you might need help opening or accessing or moving anything, just let one of us know and we'll help you out. Okay, now the good stuff. It's the good stuff now. So the readings, the juicy stuff, the stuff you've been waiting for. So Prathna, River, and Trynne will read for about 15 minutes. A little more, a little less, depending on what they're feeling. And feel free to, let some questions percolate if you'd like, because we'll also be sitting down for a question period toward the end, about 20 minutes or so, and you'll definitely get a chance to jump in if you feel so inclined. Also, folks at home, you can feel free to jump in too. Emma will be moderating the chat. So if you have something floating around that you'd like to ask one of the poets, Emma will just shout it out to us, and I will repeat for the poets, and we'll transmit it in here. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It feels so streamlined when you're doing it in person. Not all the here is how you use your desktop computer if you're using it for the first time. And I'm not a techie, so I'm not very good at that either. So I think without further ado, we will start with the wonderful River Halen, who just released a book I'm extremely excited about, and I think you will be too. River Halen, who is an award-winning transgender writer of Catalan and Danish descent, lives in Jojage, Muniang, Montreal. Their poems and essays dealing with relation, ecology, transformation, and sexuality have been published widely in Canada, as well as in the US, Australia, and in translation in Japan. Their first book, Match, was shortlisted for the Trillium Book Award for Poetry, and their recent book, Dream Rooms, which just came out, a collection of essays and poems, includes works selected for Best Canadian Essays, and was praised by the Bay Area Reporter as unique and mesmerizing. I read it. I agree with that. And I'm excited for you guys to hear it. And please warmly welcome River Halen.
Thank you so much, Faith, for that beautiful introduction. Thank you so much for having me and for coming here, everyone. Wait, I'm gonna find the right distance to stand from this microphone before is this good? Okay. So I'm gonna read from my recent book, Dream Rooms, which just came out last month. I could describe it a lot of different ways, but I guess the most succinct way I would explain the book is a collection of essays and poems about the years or the interval of time that led up to my coming out as trans. That isn't really the foregone conclusion of the book, or the book isn't really building to that. It's more about a kind of state of unknowing, or a state of destabilizing knowing, in terms of looking at the details of an immediate surroundings and thinking about kind of how to remake reality in a radical way. I'm gonna read two things. So the first thing I'm gonna read is from near the opening of the book. I have this kind of longer diary-style piece about an interval of time when I was looking after a stranger's pet rabbit that was very ill and dying. As a way to have housing after a breakup. And what can I say? The piece is called Some Animals and Their Housing Situations. I've given both the rabbit and the stranger pseudonyms. The rabbit's pseudonym is Frog, and the stranger's pseudonym is Soft Force. And time in this piece is marked as I give the date, and then the year is a rotating list of animals that went extinct in that year, or that were declared to have gone extinct. I think that's everything you need to know to understand. I'm going to jump in kind of in the middle of the piece, but I might pause if I need to explain more. December 11th, in the year of the only remaining Rab's fringe-limbed tree frog. He's male. The last known female died in 2009. He's held on a while, though. Maybe he'll make it through another year. When I pick Frog up from surgery, his chin is shaved, which makes him look like an imaginary order of monk. Rabbits' teeth grow continuously to sustain the continuous eating rabbits must do to live. What happened is they grew so long on one side they pierced the gums, which healed, and then were pierced again and healed, and were pierced and healed at such rapid intervals the processes merged, so the more appropriate term might be peeled or hearsed. Between the stitches, where they drained the abscess, are ugly gaps. At these I am to aim syringefuls of iodine 3 times a day. Sucked up from the bottle, it is like cherry juice or dilute blood, a measured red quantity of jewel. Over time, I expect it will turn Frog pink, since he is mostly white, and the process imprecise, like basting. Other syringes full of medicine are to be aimed at Frog's mouth. I chase Frog around all evening with the syringes. Near midnight, he backflips out of my hands and thwacks his little horse skull on the edge of the glass coffee table. Oh, sweetheart. On the verge of December 12th. The internet suggests rabbits can be tricked into eating medicine if it's stirred into a fruit puree. I go to Shoppers Drug Mart and buy 3 kinds of baby food. It's midnight, but they're open, because Shoppers Drug Mart is a place like the human brain, always either awake or dreaming, processing something. I've decided the clerk is handsome, with his tired eyes and unusual skin texture. While I'm reaching into my raincoat pocket for my credit card, an image bubbles up. The clerk, wrapped in a towel, arms pinned to his sides, kind of mummified, struggling ineffectually. Meanwhile, I'm pressing a syringe of baby food between his lips. Hey, sweetie, I say in the thought. Gorgeous holds still, his breath becoming all appley. Not a sex act, per se, but one of those elliptical activities people sometimes still pay each other for. In this scenario, who would pay whom? And meanwhile, he's thinking things too. He must think I've given birth. I've given birth to a baby, and it's back at home, waiting for me to return to it with this miniature musk-up orchard. Frog loves baby food. I'm pretty sure if he could choose, he would eat nothing but baby food. But it gives him diarrhea. The landlord is an old man I've not met yet, but who inquired about my character and the nature of my shoes, loud or quiet, before I came. Setting him aside, the living room is first Soft's, and then mine, but right now it's Frog's meadow. In the meadow I squat, surrounded by a smattering of bunny poop, while Frog licks my bare legs or jeans devotedly. I tithe him a percentage of my cut-up apple and let him eat the edge of a rare book. I'm far enough down the line to inherit Soft's possessions that I offer everything freely. I'm not too fussed about the condition of the wooden couch legs or the album covers. I wear my white socks, which Frog seems to view as company. He gets really excited and starts to hop around between my feet as if in a herd. The new purpose of my white socks is bunny lingerie. I suddenly feel so great in them. I worry I will step on Frog, but I also want to prance. In theory, I have the power to do things Frog doesn't like, but in practice I don't. There's no way to be liked while squirting iodine into a wound, which is what is currently required. I don't especially mind whether I make myself unlikable to Soft, who has a giant painting of himself and his girlfriend in their swimsuits on the wall of his office that I practice the following conversation with. Hi, Soft. Hi. I know you've just spent $1,000 on your bunny, but you need to spend more. Why? Because it offends my sense of myself as a lovable person to continue to try to wrestle your bunny into inescapable holds when he doesn't want to be held. Also, it's exhausting, and no holds are inescapable, it turns out. If I were there, I could totally show you some inescapable holds. I would rather you show me your credit card number. Soft is mostly naked in the picture, which gives me an advantage. December 15th. When I drop Frog off at the vet's the second time, he has to sit on the waiting room floor in his cage while I fill out some forms and explain about the baby food. During that time, he makes friends with a cat who is loose in the office. By friends, I mean that Frog makes nibbly faces at the cat through the bars, and the cat marks Frog's cage all over with the scent gland at the corner of its mouth, possessively. They're about the same size. Frog is an old buck of ample girth, and the cat is petite, although a predator. Maybe this is the relationship model that will solve everything. December 17th. In the year the last known forest skink named Gump died in a zoo. Alice Notley says, "Don't alliterate or you'll go to hell." I'm doing something far worse. Walking around the apartment singing Tori Amos's Playboy Mummy with the bunny in mind. You seem ashamed, ashamed that I was a good friend of American soldiers. The use of the word friend. What Tori means is most likely not love, but performance of particular acts of care in exchange for something in a situation of precarity. Also soldier, synonymous here with man. all these little hooks in language holding a very big thought together, like a net across the world. I'll stop there. Thank you. I've gone and lost my spot. So the next thing we're going to read is a poem from later in the book. I mean, I guess I could content warning for a variety of things. There's some sexuality. There's some birth control device removal. Capitalism. I don't know. Airbnb. Uh, so, yeah. Okay. This is called Honeymoon. So there was never any pure time, if pure time exists for anyone, I do not know. I think of when you gave me my pet name, after you came so hard that afternoon on the rented bed, the month or so when you would say things like, ooh, you like taking your credit card out in front of your friends, Power, if I tried to pay, or some sugar in your coffee, Power, if I tried to sip, or, oh, Power, your head hurting you again, if I touched my temple, even or especially in public. And I would blush as if I really were a public utility lighting up information for others to read. We were on a trip, the purpose of which was getting a copper birth control device extracted from my cervix without paying a lot of money in interprovincial medical fees. I was moved that you came too. I remember when I got the IUD, I thought it was a freedom, and it was, like if you're already living in a mousetrap and someone offers a tiny mousetrap to go inside you, thank you. But why my body, which I understood increasingly was perfect, had to change so the cishet sex script, which I'd mostly always known was trash, could continue unmodified, was answerable only in terms of a history I was leaving on a trip with you. Half insane I was to be so into you. I mean, you were unaccountably hot to me in the way that people sometimes are. Our voluptuous affection a risk, our relationship volatile because the threat of it went everywhere, deep into some muscle out again. 9 months after we broke up, I read a zine by Mira Bellwether called Fucking Trans Women. It had a diagram of muffing, which is an act that opens space where none appears to exist, through the power of strategic touch. And it was not my body in the diagram, but I understood I needed to perform such acts and have such acts performed on me, that perfection was not a narrow but an incredibly expansive concept involving change / refusal to change / radical change / refusal / alteration and growth in a loop. Between getting off the bus and arriving in the leaf light on a bed at sunset in our Airbnb, a doctor opened me with a clear plastic speculum and pulled hard on a thread while I gasped. It did not hurt very much, though I'd been braced for something. The initial insertion had involved about 9 seconds of the most blinding pain I'd ever known, beyond what I'd imagined pain could be, the kind of vehicle the rich ride into space just to see what it's like. I remember I was suddenly so sailing I understood leisure, and that I could become addicted to the end of pain, the wash of chemicals pain excites ending, which from the outside looks a lot like being addicted to pain, though the states are distinct. And as I write this, I feel ashamed the outer marker of my pain threshold is represented by a tiny T of twisted copper wire, fanning out in me like a margarita umbrella wishbone. I mean, people give birth, for Christ's sakes. People dilate after vaginoplasty, and even me, if I wanted to tell stories about my body, I'm sure I could find a better one. I'm 30-some years old and have lived through some situations, but pain is a very clarifying state in that it removes the outside world entirely. You get to focus on your feeling. I was so completely in my feeling. Other people were gone, so was narrative. Shame was a tiny speck down on the ground. It was the perfect lyric moment. The poem my endorphins wrote for the thread. I keep the syllables close. Would I repeat them? Maybe. Anyway, the removal took about 4 seconds and did not feel like much, and then I got to look at it, my first crush. It was a plastic T with copper wire coiled around, as I'd been told but hadn't yet witnessed, and then suddenly we were exiting the subway station, late, in comparison to an invisible expectation our Airbnb host had been holding in his head, though we had not promised him anything except that we would be unpredictable for reasons he could not know. Time is funny, those moments you re-enter its tense. He was chilly with an underlying violence. He was hello in an aggression I wished to run from, but we'd paid. I thought about the question of what the fuck his problem was. It was either too much power or not enough, and the interesting thing was, I had no way of knowing unless I asked, and he replied with the truth, which was not a thing I could imagine happening. How could I access a mind like Mirabelle Weather's? Where was the diagram of how to place my index? What if he was not the real owner at all, just some underpaid guy pretending to own a house in order to comply with a set of rules someone else was profiting from on the internet, and this charade created complications I could not know? Ownership was a lie we complicated by paying rent. We were the problem he could see. We could see him too. It was important to look. The lighting in the rented room was the kind you should never touch. A sunset was threaded crisscross like lasers protecting a work of art. We lay down in it without closing the curtains. You were afraid to touch me because of what I'd just been through. I was afraid to be touched, though I was in no pain at all. Maybe I was scared not of pain, but endorphins. Some wires crossed. Anyway, I touched you and stayed partly hidden in my clothes while you opened up slowly to that amazing, stupefied state where the minute and the hour and the day are all the same. You have so much power over me right now. I'm going to call you power. If you call me that, you realize I will have to call you glory. It was a dialogue that happened through our bodies when the veil was thin. We laughed for longer than we probably had earned. Our ignorance of the Lord's Prayer and the novel by Graham Greene had not spared us. There are certain things you can't escape, so just incorporate. Wait for the next lover to take you to a doctor who will pull the thread. After you, I slept with a very feminine man I hadn't previously realized I was attracted to, but it turned out I deeply was. I admit I hoped he was open to trading forms, that if we fucked in just the right way, I could be a very feminine man, and he could be whatever ambiguous kind of woman people were constantly mistaking me for. Of course, we never fucked in just the right way. I mean, we did. It was pure and endless. Thanks so much.
I like what's easier on being online is like when people say stuff that's brilliant, I can very frantically type it out so I can remember and seem like a really good listener and all that great stuff. And also, I feel like I want to hold on to things that people sometimes feel like it's just like a scrap of language that comes out. And so, of course, I will not say this the way that you did. That was so wonderful. But River, you mentioning like the book just being this radical transformation of or altering of time, and which we'll go back to, I'm sure, in the conversation. But I was like, I just want to hold on to that because I think that's such a gorgeous kind of way to describe the project, and I think what a lot of the books tonight do for me too. Also, I love the Tori Amos reference. We should talk about Tori Amos. I feel very passionate about Tori Amos. I'm very happy she's getting her due and being in a poem. Thank you. And now I'm very excited to introduce to you Prathna Lor, who is a poet, essayist, editor, and educator who is published in Canadian Literature, Diagram, C Magazine, Jacket 2, Poetry is Dead, and Plenitude Magazine, among others. Lor is poetry editor at Shrapnel Magazine, which is a fantastic magazine if you haven't checked it out already, and holds a PhD from the University of Toronto. They live right here in Montreal. We're very happy to have them tonight. Please welcome Prathna Lor.
Hello, thank you. Is the volume good? Okay. I am no longer the editor at Shrapnel. That's just recent. So if any of you are looking for a job, I'm sure they will be hiring sometime soon to replace me.
They did a great job on Shrapnel.
I'm going to read from my book Emanations, and it's a difficult book to talk about in terms of like what it's about. And the best way I can sort of summarize it is what basically goes on in my head when I'm out in the street. It's a book about walking. I love walking. Walking is like one of the most powerful things I can do. It's extremely erotic in terms of like taking up space. But it's a book about grief and sort of the violence of being trans and brown and femme and being out in the world and what that means. And so the voice is important for me here. I'm going to read from the first section and then a few other poems, just because the book is so small, I could probably read all of it in 15 minutes. And it opens with an epigraph from one of my mentors, Gail Scott. And one of the ways I like to balance, really difficult material is being an idiot. I see some of my students here, and I'm going to out myself now that I teach really, really difficult things, both conceptually and thematically, but I perform being a clown and stupid. just so they can feel more comfortable to be around the material. But also just in general life, I find that being an idiot, it's a really fun way for other people to expose their own idiocy very, very quickly. In any case, this is the line. I trot feeling retrospectively like a miso-coated salmon. And so just imagine as you're listening that you are a miso-coated salmon walking in the street. I cannot explain myself well. I coddle doubt because it protects me. I want to unspeak the history, not because it burdens, but because it lives on the precipice. And I am there too, on the divan, bleeding a recipe. Near, like amber, a voice that is put away shackles itself to a figment. Tearful, futural like pools of honey, I assemble all the names I inherit, and melting, I sway from asphalt to sleep. And now it warns your future self how easily to slit your walk once you have hurled it, severed all ligatures, and quieted the stream. The cracking face is a nearby sound, frenzy and torpor, turning spirit against itself. And I am a thing of human descent. You have heard the voice, not as betrayal, as luminescence, a slow whistle, a slip. I am naked. I thought I could write woman, and someone had already said no, but the writing of the women is. There are so many ways you can lie beside yourself and refuse. Every day I make amendments, but they keep me alive. I scatter my sentiments, seduce cruelty. I keep my voice low, quieting intuition. I offer grace to everyone but myself. Pain or murder, that is the choice. Is that the choice? Set the scene, play it back again. We were 3 this time, maybe none. I take myself out for a walk because I need relief in the dimming world. I am looking, and someone else is too, for a moment. I am denuded by shame that isn't mine. Pull up my legs and then tell me something. I didn't think about what to do. I moved us along the interior of fear. I gathered my figure and left my scent on the crossing. I want to refuse the questioning, and if I say no, in a room I am where you are not thinking. I write endlessly in the register of prayer. Inside of my voice is our sound, thinking the fractures where I emerge from every monument, listening for my footsteps. So unloved, can the body ever speak? I bare my throat, stretching the cavity, more unlike, piling light, indelicate. So much goes unmissed, and so much goes. It seems simple how the heart stops. And if I made the swan go forth, and if I made the honeydew sweat, and if I made the everyday divine, and if I stopped to call, and if the wounded were blessed, and if the belly was caressed, and if curiosity stopped, and if I could walk, how I wandered into this corridor, swelling with delight. And no more learning, I find it unbearable to move when you are willing. All this talking makes me drowsy, though I long for the world. I prefer justice on the seat of my mind. I sing for duty and acquiesce to the reign of the paragraph, culling. I am beginning in the end, unbounded and vessel alike. You belong to crystal, the body obsidian. I am a woman of the disaster, seeping in the willowing, and disaster never arrives. I know my voice is. The trick is to believe everything lives our choral signature. Each day I return to my bed. I walk about myself, because too much is sublime, because I was born into doubt. I did not know my own name. I embrace the inconstancy. I won't wear the blood's wearisome price. I am here in the present perfect, torn out of mockery, lies. The common measure we give up in the body is not a question worth considering when it is already transposed to nearness. I welcome the calamity between delirium, but there is a voice in what language breaks. one incantation to another, because I may be seen as borrowed from one time, given to another, so I appear when tempered. Reality is always disappointing, where sense must be torn. I touch my body to unknow myself, smooth the forcing, gifted as luck, living in the second person. I commit to radiance as becoming. Set the scene, play it back again. You were two, no, at least three, but they saw only one. Regardless, you lived your simulated path, locked in by demand. I am called by another name, then another. The dark follows into me, and I appear on the stream, hard in a glow. But you know better to not know, to float and live glibly. You can dream in another tense. An altar can be a place and time if you know the reeling figure, the placement of the hands, loosening the body when you've hardened it. Remember, you belong to crystal. Thank you.
Remember you belong to crystal is so, oof, really appreciate that, Prathna. Thank you so much. And I love this notion of poetry being this kind of continuous conversation with the self, this kind of casual guide to living. That really resonates. I'm really looking forward to asking you more about that. Okay, and finally, tonight, we have my good pal, Trynne Delaney, whose book I'm very excited for you to read. Trynne Delaney is a writer currently based in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. They hold a Master's of Arts in English Literature and Creative Writing from the University of Calgary. Their work appears in The Puritan, Contemporary Verse 2, Carte Blanche, Guts, Watch Your Head, and the League of Canadian Poets chapbook, These Lands, a collection of voices by Black poets in Canada, which was edited by Shalene Knight. The Half Drowned, a poetic novella, was just published by local press, Menatron Press, in 2022. And Trynne also just published A House Unsettled, which is a novel for young adult readers with Anik Press in October 2022. So check that out for the younger folks in your life. And Trynne grew up in the Maritimes. Please welcome the lovely Trynne Delaney.
Hi everyone. I'm really happy to be here. I'm just going to adjust this mic. Thank you. Faith was coaching us on how to adjust a mic earlier, and I tried to listen closely. Does this sound good? Great. This is my first time reading in Montreal. I've lived here for 2 years now, but I've never been in a room with people in Montreal before. I think it's actually a bit too high. But yeah, I'm just really excited that I got invited here today to read with River and Prathna. And I'll be reading from my book, The Half Drowned, which came out, as Faith mentioned, in the spring of last year, or this year. I guess it's been a long year. And it's a hybrid form work, so there are some parts of it that are closer to poetry and some parts of it that are closer to prose, but it deals with a vision of a future where there are very few people left on Earth, and there's like a small community by the Bay of Fundy, which is the ocean where I grew up closest to, has the highest tides. They're like, I think 40 meters. I'm not sure which one. They're really, really extreme tides. You don't want to get stuck out past the tide line. But anyway, I think I'll just start reading because I wrote this book so I wouldn't have to explain myself. Just a content warning about the reading. There's going to be mentions of death and grief. So if you don't feel great about that, you can leave if you want. That's cool. Ancestors, prologue. This is not a history lesson. You tucked in good? Then let us tell you Back in the day, we worried about rogue waves, street checks, library fees, clean water, developers, all our cousins moving west for opportunity. On some calm weekend, maybe our grandparents would take us out to the beach and we'd pretend there was no danger despite the omens. Seal carcasses and plastic vomited onto shore. We turned away, threw bottle caps back out into the water, nested waste in more plastic bags. All this destruction, and we were only casual believers in endings. Those rocks we used to climb crumbled, tired sediments. Everything wasted down. We used to live in old salt boxes, on farms, public housing, bungalows, apartments. Imagine the walls in a toxic salmon pink our parents chose to favor. Triangulated destiny. Our homes placed us between a pulp mill, oil refinery, and nuclear power plant. Big business employed us, let us rise in ranks when convenient. Maybe ends didn't faze us because they happened all the time. But of course, you know our end came first with official papers scrawled in an unknown script some hundreds of years ago. These small wounds of loss ulcerated within that large-mouthed hole. We became stolen people on stolen land. And so we stayed when everyone who could left for the sky. Before and after and always, here, our thousands of joys proliferated. We couldn't leave. Finally, we had the invitation to live on this land in peace and friendship like we never did before. We keep it simple, live as well as we can. In the first floods, there was euphoria even as we lost our homes. We had to move uphill into some unsteady yet permanent state of being earthbound. Sometimes we still buzz with the excitement of living through intentional destruction when we get a storm bad enough to make you soar, but not enough to make you ache for generations. Everyone out in their wading pants finding something unexpected in the water. Looking down to where the silt has settled, a clear current runs. Something sparkles from a crack in soggy pavement. Maybe it's fool's gold. Then again, sometimes what you thought you lost resurfaces. And in these glittering moments, sometimes we choose to see good omens, the planet returning to some future whole. Swimming lessons. Blue feet crumble off a cliff. I jump. Back in the day, at the first migration, water was death. Here in the future, at last, I am learning to breathe underwater. I drown. Beneath the rippled crust is murky remembrance. It's 2 years ago and I'm drowning because I want to. Recurrence is numbness. I drown easily, chronically, in this Atlantic, my mind in what collects here in decay. I sink so deep my ribs are up against a half-forgotten past, inaudible out here surrounded by family. Peace. No death rattle, no scent but water, no taste but saline blood, no sight without stinging. I abandon lightness, sink. Underwater, there's no bed rest, rot, scratching pus dried on sheets, no panic, delirium, calamity, calmness. Above, my eardrums beat in competition with the rattling chest as they succumb to the thick, rotting skin of embodiment. Baby playing with shells, death rattle. Kettle before boil, death rattle. No one home, death rattles around. I drown, they drown up there in their own bodies. I won't let myself. I will drown in some body elsewhere, here again 2 years ago. Rolling around my skull, some echo of my own future, past luck, desires. Deep fear deepening into hope buoys me. I break through the crust. I am steam erupted back to air and presence. I learned to swim, to tempt fate with intention. All my friends are dead, and so am I, even if I haven't left yet. This body belongs to something other than life. It reanimates for a few hours a day to make it home to harbor, then returns to the bigger body of water. This body, a dead man, zombie, flesh stretched against the knives of my bones, skin pocked with a rash from the toxic depths. I won't bathe. I'm not trying to be more clean and smooth. You think I should try to be more clean and smooth, that it will ease our bodies into some future holiness. You think it will ease the process. For you, that's what swimming is like, clean and smooth, but that's not what swimming feels like. A rush, washed back to shore, and the rattle of rocks resisting the tide's pull. Still, I am human. 2 years ago, when I was drowning, I became a beached whale. The water brought me back. Forced evolution. My fins became hands. I could no longer sing words in the right order. Speech on air was a death rattle. Shoes sifting through rocks to my body, death rattle. Dry skin on salted skin, death rattle. Dying engine of a search boat. Death rattle, I was drowning, I'm coated in plastics, and I think I see my sister splayed a lit beacon on the beach, guiding me back to harbor. Her name, Harbor. Her purpose, harbor. All I have to do is listen, watch my sister there, fetal, sleeping like the fishes, her mouth beckoning to air, her eyes beckoning to sight. Breathe air back into her quietly. Easy rescue, easy harboring of our souls side by side. Is this your gift to me? Some other prophecy you misread? You murmur in my ear, you plead for me to stay, to let you hold me closer. I am not ready. You still think we might become one. I'm thinking of us as more zero-sum. Enough. I commit to the hug of shore, cradle my sister's head in my rotten palms, stare down her mouth at the gift you've placed just past her wisdom in the canyon of her gums. This gift an ultimatum. You will take her if you cannot take me. Without knowing why, she will be forced to carry your desires. I can't manage resentment for you who knows no wrong. I carry my harbor home up the hill as your presence recedes with the water. It's not yet our time. When she wakes, I will return to you. That's all I'm going to read for now, but I wanted to do a participation activity. And has nervous laughter in the audience. But I'm not going to ask too much from you. All I'm going to ask is that you give me a number between 9 and 132. So between 9 and 132. Any number. 78. 32. Makai? 54. 126. That's a nice number. My birthday's on the 26th, so partial to that one. Anyone else? I could take a few more. 132. Wow, last page. What if we spoil the ending? Okay, one more. 109. Last chance. Malika, do you want to whisper in my ear? Okay. All right, that should be good. I'm going to read a little bit from each of these pages. Since the book's so much about relationships between people and the nonlinearity of time, I thought it would be interesting to engage community and kind of do a non-linear reading of my books. And so far I've only read the first 3 chapters. So I stopped at 2 today. And we will see what poetry this makes. I'm really excited. Holding this thin chain she took back from Kaya, she doesn't know if she deserves them, if she's really ready to be part of keeping people good and responsible to each other. Back in the day, Levon took his little baby sister to library on weekends. She climbed on his back and he gripped her knees, didn't even breathe hard on the uphill climb. How did we get here? By accident, with song? Did you think we would? Never. Yes. We were unprepared for the prospect of continued life after the mid-centennial collapse. The body flops into the bed and pulls blankets over, fold over sandwich, the way Levon always made them. Way Levon always pulled blankets when feverish and unable to stand the heat of being surrounded by comfort for too long. Kaya's hand wipes the tears from Harbor's eyes. A low hum buzzes in the hive of Kaya's throat, rougher than her old, clear voice. Blowing like it wanted to break free of her mother in the wind. They stand in the clearing at the top of the hill, no forest yet planted. A spiral of ginkgos drips from the slow peak. These trees, not native, missing link, survivors, omens? Taste of gold at her return, smile spitting teeth into the sink, run the tap, a change is gonna come rushing. A destination, some place of belonging we cannot escape. Against a palm lies a truth etched in fine lines. A return is always possible in memory. What reality might hit after the end of belonging? A baron of blue held open to all. A promise sits at the bottom of a teacup, whispering life goes on, life goes on, life goes on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Actually, if all y'all want to join me on stage, and we'll give another big round of applause to our readers. Now, this is where you'll see me do my moving around and getting adjusted. So, elevator music, Jeopardy music. And if anyone's a musician, go for it. And Emma, if you just let me know that everything is visible once I get on stage. Okay, great. Damn, y'all really left me hanging with this elevator music. What? I needed something. That's okay, that's okay. My priority is making sure I can get these set up for stage. I'm gonna pass this down just to make sure, gently to make sure it stretches. And
That's good.
we're good to go. Thank you for your patience. Oh, okay. I don't know why I sat down like I had like a lifetime of, of experiences on my shoulders. But I do feel like one thing that really drew me to all of your collections is like, just like the weight of, oh, perfect transition, just like the weight of like, the way all your speakers in these texts are like grappling with, I think, thinking of ways of how to deal with calamity or like new strategies or new inventions of moving through calamity, the small calamities that happen of like relationships blowing up in people's faces or bodies that felt so familiar to you become feeling foreign or the world declaring them as unusual, and or there's like these greater calamities that feel so difficult to try and wrangle with or to name, or to even the idea of offering solution is like, this is ridiculous. And yet I feel like all your speakers very bravely put their heads through that and endeavor, which is why I really thought of your work together. So I really appreciate just being able to hear all these works out loud and in conversation with each other. And also this great thing too of like Trynne involving the audience and Prathna, you thinking about like what it means for a work to come alive or poems to come alive in the act of moving through the world. There's this, or moving, for example, a river through memory. There's this excellent quality of like the speakers are all in movement and the poetry becoming very generative and alive through engagement and interaction on the daily. So that's my little introduction to all the works. So I thank you for all of that. And I thought we would ease into questions by maybe talking about a little bit about kinship in the midst of that calamity. And one thing I really noticed in all these books was like this really generative, awesome kind of like wrangling with kinship. I think kinship is a huge word right now and what it means to make kin or learning to be in relationship with others. But what I really admire about all your separate books is like being in relation to other people is not really easy all the time. And it sounds nice to talk about it. But oftentimes making kin can be messy. So River, I was very excited to see I looked for the exit and found a sleeve published in Dream Rooms. I think I've heard a very, very early version of that poem. And there's these, once you guys read it, there's these moths that inhabit the poem and they eat through the speaker's closet. And they're these kind of unsightly roommates. And they, reoccur with all these different people that like the speaker loves, but also they are people who sometimes hurt the speaker very deeply too. And you write, or are you more like everyone, a hole in the language I circle? And I was really thinking through that kind of thing of what it means for people to love you or for you to feel love, but also for them to encompass this kind of, rip in you. Also in relation to Prathna, for example, in Emanations, you write, I write endlessly in the register of prayer. Inside of my voice is our sound, thinking the fractures where I emerge from every monument, listening for my footsteps, so unloved. Can the body ever speak? And there's this beautiful slippage between like the beauty and the terror of individual voices coming together, being in unison, being collective, but also what it means for language to precede us, what it means for us to feel defined by others' language, and what does it mean to have an individual voice in that. And then Trynne, of course, so much of the Half Drowned is about relationships, relationships pushed to the brink, making kinship in places where kinship is considered to be impossible. And Kaya coming back to harbor, for example, toward the end of the book and saying, I thought I didn't belong because I wasn't like everyone else, but I am like everyone else. We're all just different types of survivors. So I want to thread those lines in and give shout outs to some lines that weren't mentioned in the readings, because I love them so much, and ask you guys, how does writing for you provide perhaps a generative place to think through strategies and difficulties of making kin? And what does the page allow you to reach out to, or who does it allow you to reach out to, or who would you like to refuse when you go to the page? Whoever wants to start, whoever wants to tackle it. No pressure, no pressure.
So like in my book, I think primarily what I started with is like the multiplication of my own selves and that I have to deal with, under under racism. Racism is like a hall of mirrors, and it produces many, many different images and fantasies that are projected onto you, and you're supposed to be this thing, but then you're not this thing. And so in that sense of alienation, for my book at least, trying to give voice to all of these things that are sometimes your own thoughts, sometimes echoes of thoughts that aren't your own, but somehow you become convinced that that you're this thing that you shouldn't be. So in that sense, like, what is my relationship to these cruel selves I have that are me and aren't me? And hopefully, I was trying to kind of create a space where the voice is both open and opaque, so people can step in, not as a kind of like multicultural smorgasbord of like unity, but just like a shared threshold of like what it means to live. And for me, this book is like deeply personal insofar as like what small gestures can I make to make like the everyday a little bit beautiful, just to live and survive.
When I think about kinship in relationship to dream rooms, I guess the first thought that comes to mind is that the book is less focused towards like processes of building kin in a practical sense, and is more sort of in the phase of like registering places that has been erased, or registering like places that huge elaborate mechanisms have been erected like as barriers to kinship. There's an image I work with like near the end of the book of like the blank page as a like that like as standing in for like things that are not known in terms of like family histories, or in terms of like how to be in relationship with oneself or with other people, and but that blank page being paradoxically like a space of densely packed information is just like stuff that you don't know how to register or digest or be in relationship to. So I guess, yeah, I think that my head was more in like a tracking failures in kinship, or naming precise kind of like, yeah, the path one would have to travel, or what the obstacles one would have to overcome would be.
It's a huge question. I think I was trying to do a similar thing to both of you in writing The Half Drowned. Of at times I was building towards community, and like the project started out as something that was building towards community, imagining a future that's like kind of a utopia for Black people in the Maritimes, which like definitely doesn't exist right now. And then I kept coming up against all of the barriers of the future, and the ways that the future reflects ourselves back to us, like in the present, and like how we can imagine a future when we're stuck within these systems that reflect all these different like versions of ourselves to us, and not all of them feel accurate uh, to look at. So yeah, it was constantly like an ebb and flow of working with these relationships that resisted coming together, while also like craving that closeness and craving that intimacy that comes with building kinship.
I'm thinking of a line, Prathna, that you mentioned earlier. And I pray that I'm quoting this correctly, but we can dream in a different tense. Okay, stop. And I think, Trynne, that line from Prathna's is coming up for me, because there's this element of so many images or ideas of futurity that we have in our everyday culture are just the present tense, essentially, in that things are the ways that people are subjected to violence or erased from daily life, that language just still somehow does not exist to encompass so much the multiplicity of existence, still does not exist in a techno-futuristic world or something. And yeah, I think there's such a resonance then too in what you're saying, River, of like what it means then to come into full recognition of the barriers of the cutoff instances of kinship, of the ways that we could have made language together, and to finally come into that recognition of go, okay, what do I need to do now then? What am I being called to do? How do I then build the space that has been denied to me or to others from here? Yeah, does anyone have any questions they want to jump in with, or online? Don't worry, I have a question just in case, because everyone gets a little shy. Oh. There was this very delightfully funny moment of a lady laughing out loud and then looking over and going, ooh. I've been there many a time. Maybe what I'll do is I'll transition into a second question, and then y'all still have a few minutes if you're thinking through something. But one thing I also wanted to bring up too is like this instance of like the way that you guys mark time so clearly in your books, and all these unique ways that you're marking time. Like Trynne, your characters speak of like back in the day, and this full kind of word, this era essentially of back in the day. And it's not like this perfect utopic past that everyone is, really just completely saddened or dismayed that they're no longer part of. That would be too convenient of like apocalypse or something, or apocalyptic narrative. But there's like this, persisting present of, or like the way that the past comes into the present. So like Black folklore and materiality appear through the Half Drowned. Even in like, for example, when Harbour does her rites, there she gets these gold grills in her mouth, and this passing down of like Black culture today, and the resonance of Black culture that goes back for generations, the importance of gold, but also the way of caring for memory in this way and passing it through to the next generation. Prathna, you did an interview with Open Book, and you've spoken of your poetry. I'm going to quote you because it was really lovely. Spoken of your poetry as always trying to work through you, and that if it loses its way in writing, the poem will return as another. So like there's this quality of like experience being recycled and made whole and new again in just different exciting ways, which is why I feel like your poems in this collection have such a kind of internal quality or resonance, which is really interesting. And then, of course, I really love this opening, the opening essay, River, in some animals and their housing experiences, because I am in love with frog, I think. And and then there's also this thing of like, you're watching the speaker and frog build this kind of their own specific relationship. And then there's also the way that time is being marked is, as you mentioned in your introduction, species extinctions. And there's a part in the essay too where there's like a kind of catalog of species that are suspected to have gone extinct or have been confirmed to be extinct. And so there's just like this, casual disappearance happening in the world around us, and what it means to mark time in this way. So, how did time, when you were writing these books, how did you feel it shift or inspire your work or work against you even? And do you feel that time works differently to you in a poem or text? And what captivates you about that?
So I feel like I have a lot of thoughts about time in relation to this book. I was thinking about, I guess time as a function of experience, or like that maybe time and experience are inseparable in a certain sense, that like as in just like very straightforwardly, if a certain amount of stuff happens, like that could happen all at once or drawn out over a period of time, but that might be kind of the unit that represents time somehow. So like in that piece where I'm marking, like each time I write the date, it's like in the year that such and such an animal went extinct. Like it's all the same year, but this idea that the name of the year might change in this multiple, like that too much stuff or more stuff is happening than in one year. So yeah, so like a certain density of experience over a certain amount of like time as an absolute could represent a kind of cataclysm, could represent a period of like radical change. It's like, I guess I think of the book, I haven't really thought this through, but I like your question. The book has kind of like these like fast, and these sections I think of as fast sections, or that there's something that happens to time when like in sections of the book where attention is being paid in a certain way, where like if you look at the details of your immediate reality intensely enough, like you might enter a kind of like spiraling vortex. So I did think a lot about time and its qualities. But anybody?
Yeah, I also thought a lot about time because so much is about history, but also the future, and just the way that I experience time, I feel like is not as linear as most people, and like especially I feel like time is especially defined by like the context you're in. If you're like in school or whatever, then you're like in semesters, right? Or in years, in pandemic years. Um, and yeah, I think I wanted to represent how time can circle back in on itself, even in terms of eras. So like the different eras we've been in terms of like transatlantic slavery and the long 18th century, like capitalism continuing and intensifying towards like what end, and how we leave like souvenirs for ourselves in the future, of certain times or certain smells or certain ways of talking, souvenirs in language. Yeah, I guess that's kind of like those are my thoughts generally.
Yeah, the one I think related to what Trynne is talking about in terms of like semester time, also related to like teaching that I do a lot. And this like one of my old roommates said this, and it's like haunted me. And she's like, we think history is being recorded all the time because we're like recording things, but it's like actually not. And there's like this false sense of being in the present. And so, with my book, like, what does it actually mean to be in your body? And underneath all that grief, like, is there like a site to be graceful and have beauty? Also related to this other haunting question I have, which is like, can the racialized body ever like truly be naked and like have like pleasure and joy there underneath all that history? And so, yeah, that's unwriting that history, but also just being, I think, which is a lot of people struggle with, just because we're in this society that is so techno-fascist, and it's a culture of speed, basically.
To be able to slough off time or something, and like the slime of it, if that's possible, and also what it means to turn back to what an era is supposed to be or something, and like completely redefine it is also a gesture that makes a lot of sense and has a lot of power. Even if that means like to reevaluate your own personal relation to what you defined as an easy era in your head, to completely remake that. Yeah, really appreciate that. Any questions online? Oh, actually, we have someone in the audience. I'll keep you in mind. Any questions online, Emma? Then I think we'll turn it right over to folks in the audience. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here. You want to just step up closer to the mic? Sorry to put you on the spot, but I realize I don't have my... There you go.
No worries, thanks. My question, unfortunately, isn't related to any of the questions that you were asking, but I was curious about who or what all of you were reading when you were working on your book, or who you imagine your book to be in conversation with.
Oh my gosh, so I wrote this book over such a long period of time. Like, the earliest things in it are from, I think I started them in 2014. So I don't remember. I imagine that I have read a lot of things. There, like, towards as it was coming, like, I guess the book is sort of more like something I archaeologically found among my own trash and papers than something I set out to write. And so during that process, when I was like putting stuff together and being like, I think this is a book and it goes together this way, I was reading a lot of Renee Gladman. I was reading Calamities and Houses of Ravika, which, yeah, are really beautiful texts in terms of like situating a self in a place and looking at the intersection of like space and time, and like walking through a physical space, and thinking about also like being seen from the outside and trying to clock like what are the dimensions of that, and how can I register like what I am in other people's gaze versus other ways of knowing.
Let me think back. Kinesia Lubrin, Anne Carson, Lisa Robertson, lyric poets, Liz Howard, lyric poets, just to kind of understand how the lyric functions.
I also find it hard to remember, only it wasn't a long time for me. I just have a really bad memory. I literally had to write like a works cited because this started as like my master's thesis. Um, let me try to think. In the Wake by Christina Sharp, also Kinesia Lubrin. Um, the Great Derangement by Amitav Ghosh. Um, and then some like more historical texts about Black Loyalist history in the Maritimes. And I also took a research trip to the Maritimes to visit the Black Loyalist Heritage Museum. So I guess the landscape of the Maritimes was also one of the things I was reading.
And thank you so much for your question. I think one thing I always constantly think about when asking questions like that or when audience members jump in is that each time I'm going, great, love that author. Oh, I need to check that out. And going, why do I not have like an APP like book list or something that's collated? So I hope some of y'all were able to note those down in your head. But maybe I will finally do it one day. It's going to be recorded, so maybe I will finally collate all the names and books together. Do we have any last questions kind of stirring in the room? Your last chance. Oh, yes.
Hi, thank you all so much. I really loved, Trynne, what you were saying about souvenirs. And I was just kind of wondering, I imagine for all of you, you're experiencing a very different relationship to your own work, like holding a published, finished thing, but also the act of performing it. And I guess I'm just wondering how it has changed your work for you, or how you're kind of like feeling about sharing it in a public space. And yeah, thank you.
I'll start the other way. Dun, dun, dun.
So your question was how it feels to share your work in a public space and how it's different when it's like a material object as like a coherent thing.
Everything you guys were saying about the time you were writing it and the distance it feels from that. So I guess a continuation of the question about time returning to the tangible thing and the event of reciting from it, I guess.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. As my like this is my first book, so it's been a real journey with lots of phases of like how I felt about it emotionally over time. Like initially when I was working on it, I was just so excited about the work and so in the work, and like it was just me and this thing I was creating, and I understood all of it. And then going through the editorial process was also just a process of like making sure that I was communicating what I wanted. But like as soon as the book was a book, I started to feel kind of like this unease with it as an object and kind of like almost a hatred towards it. Because it wasn't like representative of what I wanted to do anymore, and it had like taken me through this intense period of isolation too, and the book's so much about community, and I was like, what does that mean if I was like writing this book alone this whole time, and now I'm sharing it with people and that feels better again. But it's kind of been like waves up and down of like, is this book giving me what I need right now? No, yes, maybe it's giving me something else. Maybe it's not mine. Maybe it's something in between. I don't know. I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah, I mean, publishing is just slow, as we all know, and my book was like delayed because of the pandemic, and the manuscript I started with was not the one I ended with, and so there were just changes over that time that happened. But yeah, like once it's like you're out and you're talking about it and publishing it, also for me, like that book is like 10 years of me just fuming and stewing, and so like I really relate to that, where like I'm no longer these people in this book, but and even just to revisit it, there's like another like secondary revisionary mourning of like myself, which is kind of strange. But yeah, I think the best thing to do is just like start a new project and move on, and then you can be mad about that when that comes out.
Yeah, I mean, I feel I could echo what both of you have said here about it. That's the strangeness of something very old, and then sort of like, yeah. So there is this sort of sense of like, in some ways, like ventriloquizing like older selves or older thoughts. I think when I think about I think a lot about like musicians, and I'm like, oh wow, like some of them like you just like write a song, and then like what if people like the song, like you could just be performing it repeatedly for like 45 years. I'm like, how? And I'm like, oh my God, I've had to read this poem twice, and it's so old to me now. But anyway, so I try to keep it in perspective. But yeah, there's a reason that's not my career, but multiple reasons.
That, and I very shamelessly demand that of musicians. Like when I go and see Tori Amos and I demand she play Marianne, a 30-year-old song. But I think a perfect way to end is thinking about Prathna, the 10-year-old fuming of your book. And I love how all of your books are some of the most beautiful fuming I've read in a very long time. So please give a very warm round of applause to River Halen, Prathna Lor, and Trynne Delaney. Thanks so much for being here tonight, guys. Really appreciate your readings. And thank you to you all for coming out on a November night and being with us here in the space and also online. I appreciate you all there as well from the comfort of your own homes. I hope we're able to do this more often too, where you're able to join us from your kitchen or from your bedroom and be able to enjoy poetry in that way. Thank you so much again to the team at ALAC and the Holiday Book Fair, which I'm extremely excited about. The Holiday Book Fair runs from this Friday, tomorrow, November 4th, to the Sunday, November 6th, and you can find the fair at Saturday. Oh, excuse me. Do not go on Sunday. You will be in trouble, and you will be very mad at me. Sorry. So Friday and Saturday, please, and that's going to be at Concordia's McConnell Building Atrium, 1400 de Maisonneuve. And there's going to be a lot of really cool events tomorrow, actually, in the fourth space at Concordia as well. At 1 p.m., there's going to be the presentation of finalists for the QWF's Spoken Word Prize. That's certainly not to be missed. At 3 p.m., writers and musicians will be engaging in live writing inspired by jazz music and reading what they come up with. And join the folks for a cocktail at the official book fair opening at 4:30 p.m. Paragraph will be there also to promote and sell books, and you can visit and browse and purchase in the atrium Friday and Saturday. So you can go to readquebec.ca for more details. And for the next APP, we'll be online. I'm hoping some of you will join us then on December 8th. That's going to be a joint event with the Violet Hour reading series. It's going to be guest hosted by Christopher Doradio, but you'll see me for a few moments, I'm sure. That's going to be featuring Jake Byrne and Eli Tarek El Bachelani Lynch, who is currently a finalist for the Grand Prix du Livre of Montreal. And perhaps we will also have a surprise guest, so I'm very excited about that. Until then, I wish you all good poetry, a good night, and a very good holiday book fair. See you in December. Thank you.